June inflation data is out. There's the top line and the bottom line. The top line is that CPI inflation was 1.9%, which is roughly the Bank of Canada's target. However, that number is artificially suppressed by the elimination of the carbon tax that the Conservative Party forced the Liberals to do. By eliminating the carbon tax, fuel prices drop, which brings down the average price increase across the full basket of measured goods. That is a good thing. Thank God that while everyone was telling us that the carbon tax was a done deal, you and I fought on to get rid of it. However, that is only a one-time savings. Once the next fiscal year comes along, those savings will no longer be baked into the inflation number. The CPI trim and the CPI median are two measures that strip out volatile things like fuel and others that are affected by the carbon tax cancellation. And they show that inflation is up to 3% and 3.1% respectively. Worse than that, I'm quoting from Bloomberg here, the 3-month moving annualized average of the core rate surged to 3.39%. From previously 3.01. 3.39 is well above both the Bank of Canada's target and its acceptable range. And this 3-month average is really important because instead of comparing year over year, which tends to overweight things that were happening a year ago, it actually looks at what's been happening in the recent 3 months, roughly 100 days. And we see that in that time frame, prices have been accelerating at an accelerating rate. Now, it will be obvious that some will say this has nothing to do with the Liberal government. It's just because of the trade war. Well, let me just quote from the Bank of Canada that said, and I quote, "The tariffs that Canada imposes on U.S. goods are estimated to affect roughly 9% of Canada's CPI or consumer price basket." So that means that 91% of the goods are unaffected. And I will note that Mark Carney has been pulling back tariffs, putting his elbows down, and therefore the tariffs have less impact going forward. So what is driving the rising inflation, and why is it that everything is so expensive for you and your family? The answer is the government is getting more and more expensive. Despite Mark Carney's talk, his sudden talk of spending less while investing more, the reality is he's spending a hell of a lot more than Trudeau. His first spending bill jacked up the cost of government by 8%, with bureaucracy going up 6%, consultants up 37%, and I pass over many other massive increases in operating expenses that leave no lasting asset but do drive up inflation in the short run. Economists, including the parliamentary budget officer, are saying now that the deficit could be bigger this year than it was under Justin Trudeau. That's right. This is incredible to think that anyone could outspend Trudeau, but Mark Carney appears to be accomplishing just that. And some of the Liberal economists are also suggesting that Carney's policies may ultimately lead to an increase in the sales tax because there's just no other way to pay for it all. We've got to reverse the inflationary spending. We know that because when you run big deficits, as Carney is doing, you create more cash. That cash bids up the fixed supply of goods and services and gives you the inflation that I'm talking about now. Further to that, because inflation is hotter than expected, it's going to be hard for the Bank of Canada to cut interest rates, which we need to do before the mass of mortgages that were locked in at ultra low rates and high prices during COVID come up for renewal. So if you've got a mortgage that you locked down in 2021 or 2022 on $1 million home, you were maybe paying 2%. Well, you could be renewed at a more than double that rate and get smashed in your monthly payments. The only way to avoid that is to bring rates down, and that can't happen until inflation comes down. It's going up, and it's worse now than it was when Mr. Carney became Prime Minister. So much for the central banker who knew all about monetary policy. What do we need to do? Well, the same thing that I've been saying all along. We need to cut bureaucracy, consultants, corporate welfare, foreign aid, and countless other wasted money so that we can bring down the cost of government, the deficits, inflation, and ultimately interest rates. We need a dollar for dollar law that requires government find $1 of savings for every new dollar of spending. And we need this kind of spending discipline to happen as soon as possible, so that we can fix the problem that Liberals caused and reinstate the purchasing power of your money. So we, as Conservatives, will be fighting for that, fighting for fiscal discipline, low inflation, sound money, because you work hard for your dollars. We want them to go further.